He reported to His Holiness that very soon we will be getting 2 planes, and then airports are being built, and within a month airports will be ready, and then we will have no problem in sending supplies to Tibetan refugees. With the sale of
Nabalake Samalola ya Samti Distillation the Shui. Tarinke Lenge Sanronange Leze di Nang, Pegi, Dimdun Kangi Kudi, Pedang, Payu Wagi Devatang, Payu Nangi, Zinju Pimishibi, Jushi To, Payu Tang, Chang Ari, Kutsop Tunju Suba, Renjin Daluchoki, Songshe Nangwi Nangne, Payu Nangi, Zinju Pimi, Lugu Borte, Surdin, Shuyuna, Di Shamla, Sisi Yomashu. Singing number 2, Lezin di Chasang Inge Nang, Yimbaredu. Number 2, Jushi Diki, Nezu Geba, Sibagina, Pegi Demdun Kangi Dagenang, Sisi Topire.
5,000 factories mainly run by Tibetan refugees.
The first Tibetan refugees in Nepal and how they built their own community.
Okay, now coming back to the Tibetan refugees. This is photo of Father Morin. He lived in Nepal for many years. When Nepal had its first college, Trichandra College, he was living in Patna, running Jesuit school in Patna. And he was invited to oversee the English examination of Trichandra College. And then since then he went to Nepal from time to time and established 2 schools, St. Mary's and St. Joseph School. So when Tibetans, in 1959, 60, 61 and 2, almost 40,000 Tibetans have crossed the border to Nepal. Nepal has a very long border with Tibet, starting with Tingke and Walung, Tingke in Tibet and Walung in Tibet in Nepal, and then Tingri and Shekhar in Tibet, and then Shakumbu, Solukhumbu in Nepal, and then Rongshar in Tibet, and Lamubagar in Nepal bordering, and Nyalam in Tibet, and Tatopani and Kodari in Nepal, and then Kirong in Tibet, and Rasua. Oh, Chusutosoi. Okay, anyway, I will not go into detail. Anyway, so then so many have died, those who have reached Kathmandu Valley due to climatical difference and also malnutrition and lack of medical facilities. So Father Morin established what you call, it's written there, Nepal International Tibetan Relief Committee, and he was assisted by Peter Opschnatter, who was in Tibet with Henry Harrer. And Peter Opschnatter, he preferred to stay in Kirong for longer, and then later came to Nepal. And then since he spoke Tibetan language, he was very helpful in establishing this committee. And then there was a Russian, Boris, I forgot his last name, and Boris was running the only international standard hotel in Nepal. It was called Royal Hotel, which has become today, is very close to the palace, and today is the election commissioner's office. And he was running there, and Boris hosted a reception. He, since he was running the hotel, he provided coffee and cakes, and they had the first meeting of the Nepal Tibetan Refugee International Relief Committee. And then soon after, all the first ladies of the embassies in Kathmandu, they had a party, Easter party, and raised fund, and which was shared by first ladies of the embassies, and raised substantial amount. And then since they started this, they approached all the Red Cross, like Swiss Red Cross Society, Nepal Red Cross Society, Swiss Association for Technical Assistance, and so on. And they received help from Indian Red Cross as well. And then later, it was handed over to International Red Cross Society, who decided to oversee the relief for Tibetan refugees. And this is Tony Hagen, a Swiss geologist who was a strong member of Nepal Tibetan Relief Committee, and he became the first director of International Red Cross Society for looking after the Tibetans refugees. And in 1961, he came to Dharamsala to meet His Holiness, and His Holiness sent his first representative to Nepal, Mr. Lobsang Gelek. He was sent to Nepal, and they teamed, and that, sorry. So that time, Tony Hagen reported to His Holiness that we have a lot of difficulties in reaching relief to Tibetan refugees in Mustang and Solukhumbu and all those remote areas. But then he said, International Red Cross Society has donated 2 planes, 2 plus water planes. And he said that very soon we will be getting planes. And then that time, they were constructing airstrips, airports. Pablu Airport in Solukhumbu, that was built to provide relief for Tibetan refugees. And then also in Jomsom, there is an airport that was also built to send supplies to Tibetans. And in Dolbadan also there is a small airport that was also built. Actually, it's plain, nothing built except they removed stones and the trees. That's it. Anyway, so he reported to His Holiness that very soon we will be getting 2 planes, and then airports are being built, and within a month airports will be ready, and then we will have no problem in sending supplies to Tibetan refugees. So 2 airplanes came, and they were Swiss pilots, and I remember one was Captain Emily, forgot the last name. He was there even in 70s when I first went back to Nepal to work. And anyway, so that cut a little bit. So then Tony Hagen and Father Morin established the first Tibetan carpet factory in Jwalakil. When Tibetans came, they came with skills of spinning, carding, and weaving. And they interviewed and found there were 8 weavers. One of them was a family called Pa Migma. Pa Migma was from Shigaze, and he had his own carpet factory cottage in Shigaze. His wife and his sister, they were very good carpet weavers. And there was a woman from Gangze, Amapendok, and then 2 sisters from Lhasa. They were also carpet weavers. So altogether there were 8 carpet weavers, and each of them trained young girls. And Jolkal Handicraft Center was started with 8 looms with 16 weavers. That was the first carpet factory in exile. And then for the establishment of carpet factory, His Holiness gave some money, and then also a Swiss Association for Technical Assistance, Swiss government also provided funding, and His Holiness and Swiss government became the shareholder because carpet factory was established as profit. It was not a non-profit. So what happened is that on those days we had Swiss managers. Like after Jawaharlal, one factory was established in Solukhumbu, Chalsa, another in Yangja in Pokhara, and fourth one in Dorpatan. There were 4 handicraft centers established with the help of Swiss government, and in all those factories we had Swiss managers, Swiss production managers, Swiss accountants, and so all those Swiss staff, they were of course paid by the Swiss government, but then they also received salary from each of these handicraft centers. So what happened is that in 72 all the projects were handed over to Tibetans. In the meantime, Swiss trained many Tibetans from the 4 settlements and also brought young men and women from India and trained them how to run the factory. Some were trained as accountants. And then when Swiss government handed over handicraft centers back to the Tibetans, there were a pool of fund. Like Swiss staff, when they received salaries from these factories, it was all deposited into an account. And then with that amount, the Swiss government, SADA, started Snowline Foundation to help the schools and the elderly people, and also help dispensaries, schools and dispensaries. So over the years, then Snowline Foundation grew, and today Snowline Foundation looks after, when I was there were 14 schools, but now some schools are closed. So how many schools do we have above? 10, 11, 9? Oh, today 9 schools. But in our schools today, majority of local people. Like if a school has 100 children, maybe 60 are Sherpas, Tamangs, Lobas, and the people from Helmpu and so on, and the rest are Tibetans. And then also like carpet factories. Carpet factory has become major, employment for the Nepali people. At its peak in 80s and 90s, roughly 2 million Nepalis were employed by the Tibetan refugees. And carpet factories were started by many of those who have never been to a school. Like those who were employed in our factories, many of them, were, those who worked as carpet, weaving master or dyeing master or whatever. In the meantime, they left factories and then started their own cottage industry. And similarly, more and more Tibetans have left the carpet factories and started their own small, cottage factory. And in 90s, there were roughly 5,000 factories mainly run by Tibetan refugees. And in late 80s, when young Tibetans graduated high schools and colleges from India, they went back to Nepal, and some have become employees of people who have never been to a school. Anyway, so carpet really exports boomed. It also happened at a time when Afghanistan was occupied by Russia, and people who imported Persian rug, they had difficulties in importing carpets from Persia, and then they came to know about Tibetan carpets in Nepal, and then that's how every carpet dealers in Europe bought carpets from Nepal, and it really has gone up. Now, let me finish. There are many, like for centuries, for generation to generation, Nepali craftsmen, including silversmith and statue molders, they have been supplying their products to Tibet, to the monasteries in entire Tibet, to the homes, homes of Tibetan families, and then also to some to Sikkim and Bhutan as well. But in 1959, after Chinese invasion, when the Tibetans became refugees, border was sealed, so their product could not go to Tibet, and Tibetans could also not buy, Nepali products. And Tibetan refugees, being refugee, they were selling their own, whatever they brought, silver utensils or silver cups, they sold their own, own ritual objects. So the craftsmen in Nepal, they became poor. There was no demand for their product, and many of them have become farmers. But then slowly, starting early 70s, many of those who came in exile, they became, their economy grew, and many of them began to commission, butter lamps and silver cups and mandalas and so on. And then at the same time, Tibetan lamas traveled abroad and established Dharma Centers all over the world. And all these Dharma Centers ordered their ritual needs from Nepal. And then their members of the religious centers, they also ordered, and then it boomed. And by 80s, again, there were hundreds of silversmiths. And under each of them, they had, at least 25, doing in their own home. So market boomed, statue molders as well. And today is much more. Like today, their product goes to not only to Europe and America, but also to Singapore, Malaysia, Hong Kong, and mainland China. So much in mainland China that every day, like cargo, half plane filled cargo go to mainland China. And not only ritual needs, but also decoration like moksas and vas and what else. All these products go to mainland China. And Tibetans from Tibet, they buy from Chengdu. Chinese in Chengdu, they order from Nepal, and they have their shops in Chengdu, Tibetan market. They buy from there. And what else? Just one. So it's going very, very well. And in Bauda area, if you go to Nepal and go to Bauda, there are at least 1,000 shops. And if you visit each shop, all the shops are filled with Tibetan needs, religious objects one could find. The silver cups, pumbas, mandalas, clothes, incense, prayer flags, and everything that's needed for Tibetan monasteries or ritual, one can find in Bauda. And then, as I said, there are 1,000, more than 1,000 shops, and they live with the sale of Tibetan merchandise. And under them, their suppliers, several thousand, even millions, they live with producing needs for Tibetan monasteries and so on. So that's one thing. And then, as I said, in our schools, we have local people, 60%, and they are doing so well that when we came in exile, many of these Tamils, Gurus, Sherpas, they were becoming Hindus. Many of them have their names like Ram, Sita, Lakshmi, and so on. And today they are changing their names even. And they are wearing, it has become a fashion to wear Tibetan chubas, the women. And if you see YouTube, if you Google Tamang songs or dances, you see Tamangs wearing Tibetan chuba very proudly, chuba, and then mixing Tibetan language in between the songs. And not only this, those who graduate from our schools, they are doing very, very well. And then monasteries, so many monasteries are established. At least, 125 newly built monasteries are in Nepal. It all starts from here. In 1963, His Holiness called a meeting of all the head lamas. And you see there, Sajja Tijin Rinpoche, Kamaba, Dunjum Rinpoche, and 2 tutors for His Holiness, and Bagula Rinpoche from Ladakh. All the lineage lamas have come to Dharamsala in 1963. And then the meeting, they discussed how to preserve the Tibetan Buddhism and how to promote. And that's as a result, you see so many monasteries all over the world now. And each of these monasteries have hundreds of young novices from remote areas. And after graduating from each of these monasteries, they are sent to Sajja College, Minderling Sheta, Rumdek Sheta, and then also to Sera Drebung Kanden, and also to Varanasi, Central University for Tibetan Higher Studies. And today we have many graduates from these institutions, and at least there are 200 Geshes and Khenpos. Those who graduate from Sajja, Nyingma, and Gaju monastery, they are called Khenpos. Those who graduate from Gelugpa monasteries, they are called Geshes. And they are doing very well. They are promoting and preserving Tibetan culture. And not only this, that today we find, if you Google like Mustangs, they are so proud of their Tibetan culture that many of them are now, practicing, Tibetan dances. And those children who study in Tibetan schools, when they go back to their villages, they try to adapt the local, their own songs and dances on stage, and you find a lot of good performances, like especially Yolmobas, Mustangs, Zumbas, and Sherpas. So I think I've taken a lot of time, but if you have questions and if we have time, I'm happy to answer. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. With this, we have completed today's presentation on our event. And now we have like 10 minutes of question answer session. So if any questions you want to ask to today's guest speaker, kindly please take the opportunity. Thank you so much.
I'm interested in knowing what are the changes that took place in Nepal after the growing footprints, Chinese footprints in Nepal, and the growing closeness between the leadership in Nepal and in China. How are the impacts on the Tibetan business as well? What has been the impact of the recent changes in the leadership and the growing closeness with China?
You mean impact of business with Chinese?
No, the closeness between the Chinese leadership and the Nepalese leadership has been has a huge impact, not only on the Tibetan business in Nepal, but also the growing Chinese footprints that, what I heard from people living in Nepal has been that the landscape in Nepal has been changing since there has been more Chinese business that has been investing in Nepal. How has that impacted the Tibetan business that you have mentioned since then?
I really don't know if Chinese influence in China, in Nepal has affected the Tibetan business. Tibetan carpet business was affected mainly because of the instability in Nepal itself. When there was revolt against the monarchy, like Maoists. They kept such a big, force that, and then they were also against the factory owners. They were demanding so much unreasonable demands, like in terms of wages, that, and then also there were a lot of other demands, and that's why Tibetans could not continue the carpet factories. And one thing was that when there was big production of carpets in the past, all the carpets used to be washed in Europe. Carpets are exported directly and washed in Europe, and which gives shine. But then lately, Tibetans began to establish washing, washing factories in Nepal. And by washing carpets, a lot of chemical was, used, and the water, it sank into the ground, and it polluted the whole of Kathmandu Valley, and that was also one of the reasons. And then also child laborhood has also caused a lot of problem, and that was the main cause of Tibetans losing business. Chinese, of course, Chinese have where they're very, very aggressive, and so many shops are being opened, so many restaurants have come up, and the Chinese embassy has always been behind them, economically supporting and also giving legal protection, and so many shops and restaurants have come up, and this may have impacted to some extent, but not that much. But the Chinese, traders in Nepal is expanding, increasing day by day.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Rinchen Thalola, for your kind of very informative presentation, and thank you all for making this event more successful with your presence. And we have come to the end of this event now, and I would like to end this event formally by saying this phrase: a good event never ends in the world. They take only a pause and keep us waiting for the next. So kindly stay tuned on our next event, and also you can go through our social media page, the Tibet Museum Facebook, and we just upload our events recorded video on our social media. Thank you so much.